Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. For those who are joining for the first time, I'm Patrick Amos. I'm the president of the Independent Telecommunications Pioneer Association National Capital Chapter. Today, ITPA proudly hosts our second virtual event of the season. We're thrilled to have you with us today as a part of ITPA's ongoing and popular series of information exchange sessions, from in-person luncheons to now remote sessions as part of our monthly virtual series. Today's Data Explosion webinar will focus on the emergence of data utilization and how vital and valuable the utilization is evolving as we look forward. A recent article noted that the value of data has overtaken oil, and the utilization in the federal government space is now more important than ever. Today, we welcome Jamie Holcomb, Chief Information Officer for the United States Patent and Trademark Office, to share his insight on this important topic. For those who aren't aware of who and what ITPA supports, a little bit about us is that the ITPA is a nonprofit professional association created by and for telecommunication industry partners. It's dedicated to community service. ITPA has been serving the public on behalf of telecom companies since 1920. ITPA represents more than 9,000 telecommunication employees, retirees, and industry affiliates nationwide. Today, I'm proud to announce that our annual ITPA National Assembly will be returning to the Greater Beltway area. Make sure to mark your calendars and make plans to attend our National Annual Assembly in Greenbelt, Maryland on April 22nd through April 24th, 2022. The best time to visit the Greater DC area is from mid-March to mid-April, when the cherry blossoms are in bloom. During this time, a meandering stretch of the Potomac River appears to grace the city wearing an endless pink and white garland. The Crowne Plaza Hotel is ready to take your reservations, so contact them at 1-833-681-4979 and mention code MKL to get a reduced rate. The ITPA exclusive rates will be good for 3 days prior to and 3 days after assembly. The Crowne Plaza Hotel offers free parking and a free shuttle to the Metro station in Greenbelt, Maryland, which is conveniently located within 3 blocks of the hotel. Please go ahead and make your reservations at the hotel while we have availability. Moving on to the charities that we support. Before I get started, I'd like to highlight some of our local charitable partnerships that the ITPA NCC has continued to develop. First, the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. The JDRF was able to launch a successful multi-pronged effort to advocate for those with type 1 diabetes and to be categorized as high priority for receiving COVID-19 vaccines. JDRF collected and analyzed compelling data that shows adults who contact COVID-19 and have diabetes, whether type 1 or type 2, were the 3 or 4 times more likely to be at higher risk of severe illness and hospitalization. On behalf of ITPA NCC, I'd also like to wish a happy birthday to the USO as the organization celebrates its 81st birthday supporting our armed forces and their families. We'll be introducing an in-person Capital Area Food Bank volunteer opportunity to help at their DC location. More on that a little bit later. And last but not least, we're looking forward to our 14th annual golf tournament in October, where we'll have representation from our local charities on hand and a team from the SGMA, an association that helps empower wounded veterans one airway at a time. And now I'd like to speak a little bit more about our ITPA NCC event and organizational sponsorships. Here, I'd like to recognize and acknowledge and also thank our 2022 season sponsors. To our platinum sponsors, Avaya Government Solutions, Comcast Government Services, Granite Government Solutions, Hughes Government and Defense Solutions, Lumen Technologies, and CommScope. Many thanks to our gold sponsors, BT Federal, Crown Castle, MetTel, SUS Consulting, T-Mobile Secure Federal Operations, and Verizon. We'd also like to thank our silver sponsors, Equinix, GES, Turning Point, Pathway Partners, and Zscaler. And to our technology sponsor, Panoptis Intelligence. Now, before we begin this dynamic speaker series, I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping before I turn the meeting over to our speaker committee co-chair, Ms. Donna Miller. In relationship to the press, we welcome our friends from the press and colleagues from the media. As a reminder, today's sessions are all on the record. In relationship to questions, you may submit all questions to the moderator, and we will try to get through them as many as we possibly can within the time allotted. Any technical challenges, please use the chat box in your toolbar to chat with the webinar host, and we will try to remediate them as quickly as possible. And today's webinar will be recorded and will be available for your viewing on the ITPA NCC YouTube channel. If you'd like a copy of this slide deck as well, reach out to us at info@itpancc.org. And now I'm pleased to introduce one of our board members and industry co-chair of the ITPA NCC Speaker Committee and a personal friend of mine, Ms. Donna Miller. Donna has worked in the telecommunications and information technology industries for 20 years, gaining experience in collaboration technologies, cybersecurity, cloud edge technologies, and customer experience. As a seasoned business developer and senior director at Lumen Technologies Public Sector, she is passionate about helping large federal enterprises find solutions for complex issues and mission-critical solutions. And now it is my honor to welcome Ms. Donna Miller. Donna, over to you.
Thanks, Pat. I appreciate the introduction. I always like to say 15 plus years, though. So anyway, I'm very happy to be here. It's a pleasure, and for me personally, to continue to support ITPA and to support you, Pat. I have the distinct pleasure of being here to interview Mr. Jamie Holcomb, as you all know, the CIO of the US Patent and Trademark Office. I'd like to just give you a little bio on Jamie. Before he was appointed as the CIO of USPTO, he served as the Chief Executive Officer of Visium Technologies, which is a cybersecurity startup, and the Chief Information Officer at TJ Westlake, which is a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. Prior to these executive roles, he served as Vice President and General Manager for Harris Caprock Critical Networks, providing managed security services and high-value IT services and engineering services. Importantly, while there, Jamie led the company's government solutions line of business, as well as serving as the VP of Information Systems for Global Systems and Process, even serving as a high-level client executive for the Department of State. In other words, for our sponsors, Jamie understands us at our best. Various titles he's held: VP of Information Systems, Chief Technology Officer, Senior Vice President of Operations, Corporate Secretary, Architect, Senior Principal Consultant. So he certainly knows the business. Jamie is also a veteran, and thank you for your service, Jamie. While in the Army, he served as the commander of the 1116th Signal Battalion and was awarded the Douglas MacArthur Leadership Award and Most Outstanding Officer of the Year. A West Point grad, with a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, first in his class. Jamie also has a Master of Business Administration and a Master of Science in Computer Science from the George Washington University. It's very impressive. So Jamie, when the topic was bandied about for the speaker series of data explosion, Sam Navarro and I landed on the topic of data explosion, drowning in data. I immediately thought of you. As a steward of the intellectual property in this country, Jamie, you are at the forefront. And for our audience, if you want to know how much intellectual property is preserved and sifted through to award a patent, USPTO recently issued patent number 11 million. The Undersecretary for Commerce and Intellectual Property and the Director of USPTO, Drew Hirschfeld, stated, and I want to read this, it's a really great comment. He said, since the founding of our nation, American inventors have driven our culture and commerce with incredible ideas that have improved every function of our lives. We owe a debt of gratitude to inventors who continue to show up day after day with solutions to the world's most pressing problems. What an extraordinary responsibility for you, Jamie. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for the invite. I really appreciate it. It's great to talk with you.
Thank you. My pleasure, our pleasure. So let's get down to it. Our first question starts with a statement. It's data is not just an asset. So Jamie, how is USPTO's data liquid capital or liquid gold?
Well, I got to tell you, the USPTO is so unique in its data assets, right? And the strategic high value assets, one piece of data may not be as valuable as another. And I think that's where we should start off. You know, what is valuable data? The fact of the matter is we have three types of data at the USPTO. We have before submission, we have submitted, and then we have post-award or rejection, right? And I'm not only talking about patents, there's also trademarks. So the before, during, and after, right? It's public before, but it's private during, and it's very public after. Now, when you think about that, patent pending is a real interesting conundrum, because when you have the data that's patent pending, you have an obligation to ensure people can see the abstract, but not the detail. So that data is gold. Oh my gosh, wouldn't it be great if our adversaries could track all the different new inventions that are coming up? And there's a lot of them in artificial intelligence as an example. And instead of having to invent it on their own, they do it on, they steal it. So we have a very honorable duty to ensure that we're protecting that non-public data when a patent is pending, or even when a logo is being considered. Think about the Washington Commanders, right? That's a huge thing that we had to keep under wraps. Unfortunately, somebody from the organization actually leaked that and let it go. But, you know, that's not our job, is to ensure it's protected while it's in our care. And then afterwards, it's sort of a Jekyll and Hyde. Once it's awarded or rejected, once we register it, we have an obligation to make sure everybody knows and send the word out and get it out there. So it is valuable data in different aspects and in different states. And I think that's a big deal about where people have a problem with data. Just because you have a data element does not mean it's valuable. I mean, if you have a data element, it only tells you the what. It doesn't tell you the when or the how or the why. And so most data elements are constrained to the operational environment we are right now. Who cares about what happened in the past? Right now, I just need to know what it is. And it's all about the operational systems, the transaction-oriented systems that we house. But so much information is lost when you don't have the historical parts of the data, that change element, the time that that data was inserted, the time that that data was not only created, but edited and then morphed. Without that understanding of the history of that data, you lose a lot of information. So even just the cataloging of data is a big deal, because what is data? That is the largest problem that enterprises and corporations are having all around. Of course, everybody understands a database and a query on a database. That's not what we're talking about when we talk about strategic assets being information valuable. It's very important to know the history of a data element in order to understand the information and the value of that. So in my case, when you have a patent, before, during, and after, it has different value while it's going through that pipeline. And that's the thing I think people don't grasp as an asset. And so when you're protecting your data there, you need to take all that into consideration and not only catalog, not only know what your information is, but know when it is. So I think that's a very complex and yet very simple way to look at it.
Wow. Well, thank you for that explanation. It makes perfect sense, actually, and thank you for that. So that leads me to the next question. What are innovative ways teams leverage data and artificial intelligence to benefit the USPTO?
Well, we believe that artificial intelligence is merely a tool to help us manage our data. So we have three different functions, tool sets where we use artificial intelligence. And really, I want to make sure people understand that I do not believe in the theory of general artificial intelligence. I've been doing this for a long time. Skynet doesn't exist, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is not going to come down as a Terminator and start shooting us up. It just doesn't work like that. I have yet to meet something that can do that leap of faith that's required in so much of our human learning. The reason I don't think artificial intelligence, general artificial intelligence, comes even close to the human is because the actual architecture behind the computer is it's called von Neumann architecture. There's input, process, output, and store. The fact of the matter is that's not the way our brains work. Yes, there are elements of that, storage and chemical connections and making them and reinforcing them. And some of the machine learning algorithms do an adequate job in simulation, but it still only exists for not leaps of faith, but how you can actually program to make a generalized statistical guess and then go down that path for discovery. It still requires compute. It still requires algorithms that are based on humans programming it to. Can I take this large data set, throw some algorithms at it, and then glean some information from that? Yes, but it still needs to be guided by humans. That's why we augment our examiners with artificial intelligence. We give them three things, right? The biggest thing right now is search. What we've allowed is a search tool for artificial intelligence that augments the examiner, not replaces him. What does it do? Instead of searching on the old Boolean search parsing of words, what we do is we go at it from a conceptual basis, and you create a concept or an idea, and you search on that instead of the actual words. You can still search the words. That's still a valid way to do it, but that's the old way. The newer way is to create the concept, and these concepts can result in haystacks of matches. And what you're trying to do is find the needle in the haystack, right? The fact of the matter is a patent examiner has an opposite job in search than Google. In Google, you're trying to get to one answer. In the patent search, you're trying to get to all the answers. What does that mean? An examiner has the obligation to ensure that this idea has never been submitted before. That's easy. We have 19 terabytes of prior art that we can search. But not only does he have to make sure it doesn't exist before, he has to search out and make sure nobody's thought of it since, and it's not been used in common parlance or been used out in business, how do you do that job? It has to be unique and novel all around the world. It's an amazingly hard thing. And he signs his name at the bottom saying, yes, this is awarded as a unique patent. That has got to be really hard, especially since we just did number 11 million. By the way, when I first got there 3 years ago, oh my goodness, they had just done their 10 million patent. All of a sudden now we're at 11 million. The pace of change is huge. We are getting applications all the time for new ideas. And that's great. It shows a vibrant economy. But what we did in the past using parsing tools for Boolean search, you can't rely on that any longer. It could be a good search tool, but you have to augment it with newer tools so that you can award and reject at the pace of change that's going on. So I said number one is search. Number two, another machine learning algorithm that we're using is classification. We take the abstract and the submission, the application, and we go through it to learn to make sure that we can classify it into our art units. And that gets it to the right classification, to the right examiner at the right time. Now that's a very hard thing. And in fact, we had fits and starts in the beginning. When you train your artificial intelligence machine learning algorithms, you need to have a golden data set, because if you start out with garbage, you're going to get garbage. What you have to make sure of is you clean the data sets that are coming and start out with that golden master. And then you curate that master to ensure that when you start from a good base. And you only get better if you start from that good base. So it took us about 18 months. But since we now have a great classification machine learning algorithms that actually get the right class to the right examiner at the right time, that is a huge multiplier because of the time that it's cut down into having humans classify it. That's great. So time is a big deal with artificial intelligence. I do believe that machines can process a lot better than human, or a lot faster and quicker than humans, because they don't require food or sleep. Think about that, right? And then finally, the last thing we're using for artificial intelligence and machine learning is actually fraud. We're trying to do comparisons to what we know is true and what we know has been submitted, but actually may be false. And we try to filter out those bad actors who are trying to trademark fraudulent logos, or actually trademark others' logos. That, there's a huge thing too. Did you know that 15% of the apparel in the United States is fraudulent? It's not real. It's been stolen. It has somebody else's logo on there. That's really terrible. We need to clean that up. I will say, though, that the patent office is not an enforcement arm. I want to make sure people understand we are the ones that, adjudicate, award, reject, or register, but the actual enforcement of intellectual property is done within the court system or by the FBI. So if there's crimes being committed, the FBI gets involved. And if there's if somebody is violating your patent, you got to take them to court to prevent it. A patent is only as good as you're willing to defend it in court. So that's one of the systems that we have. All right. I think, boy, I could go on and on and on, but did that answer your question?
Yes, that was great, Jamie. And yes, because trademarks and patents, definitely, this is the image of business, the image of government. You really do have to be rigorous in defending it if it really means something. So, of course, I think of designer logos, and of course, technology. Also, a comment that came up was, it's like dog years in technology, with your AI. It's just 7 years in one. So we do have a question that's popped up in our box about the proliferation of data and AI, machine learning, autonomous devices. How important is it to USPTO to bring the data closer to the examiner, the user, it says, but I'm thinking examiner?
Yes, exactly. And user could also be someone from the outside searching in. So I believe that the best decisions are pushed to the edge and not centralized. Now, I do agree that you can't do things by yourself. We can do things to scale when we get together and think together and do things well together. But at the same time, you got to have that individual time, that individual processing. So push it to the edge in order to create these breakthroughs. Most of the time when you centralize things, it's still, you need to centralize it only for a small group. When you get larger groups, what seems to happen is the social dynamics take over. So I've found through my Army training, I really believe that a 12-person team, a squad, is probably the most effective unit in all the world. So a dozen people or less, because the span of control for one person to have 12 people to care for and so forth, know and understand from a ground level, roll your sleeves up, that seems to be the best. Now, what I've tried to do then in other corporate environments is also shrink down the levels, the hierarchy, because the closer you are to line, the closer the strategy then is to the tactics. And so I truly believe that we need to push all this down to the examiner. All right, specifically AI and ML, you have to have a human on the loop. I told you, I don't believe in replacement. I believe in augmentation. So when we have a general algorithm that we're trying to get better, by the way, these algorithms are for the examiner, for the one examiner, not everybody. So the one examiner now is training his system the way he or she wants to see it come down. And that's why it's so important. He gives a thumbs up or a thumbs down based on the individual results. He gives a relative ranking, and then the machine starts learning, just like a Google machine will learn, right? The machine starts learning what the examiner wants and doing it the examiner way. We also have the ability then to go off that baseline that's created by the one examiner and look at the group and see if there's been any breakthroughs, any ideas that the individual could then glean from the group. And in that way, you get the one to many such that you can take advantage of both strengths. So we try to do that in that haystack concept, trying to find the needle in the haystack, at the same time trying to say, look at the haystacks that I brought over here. Can you conceptualize it over here as well? And that takes a lot of, that's why there's a lot of collaboration and transparency. And that's right, it does change overnight. I've told everyone, do not plan for more than 3 years to your application to be useful. Because after 3 years, it should be replaced by something that's newer and better. And if it's not, that's really bad, because that means something's wrong. You have to get better. You have to grow. And one of the things I love about the USPTO is the fact that we're not taxpayer funded. We are fee funded only. We do not take 1 ounce of taxpayer money. So we have an obligation to the fee payer, not the taxpayer. And we have an obligation to run it like a business so that those fees are used in the most efficient way to ensure and protect intellectual property, period. My fiduciary is to the fee payer. So our funds don't mix. And what we do when we gather these funds, the maintenance fees, the application fees, everything else, we're ensuring that those intellectual property rights can be defended throughout any court in the world. And so that's a very solemn duty as well. Just wanted to make sure everybody was clear on that. I hope I answered. Push it out to the edge, make sure you have the one, but don't forget the many.
No, it is a very solemn duty. So let's see, there is another question in our box. Are there any new initiatives, campaigns the USPTO is launching to combat the escalation of counterfeits that might help take a bite out of crime?
Of course, we actually work with McGruff, by the way. We actually do work with the McGruff marketing campaign. And in that, we're trying to eliminate the fraud. The obvious fraud's easy. You can filter that out through algorithms. But we're also trying to get a policy and get the law enforcement world involved. We are currently going out internationally and ensuring that others understand that fraud is being perpetrated, and we identify those places. If it's criminal against the United States, we can use the FBI. We also do a lot of informing of campaigns. There's something called the IP5. And so we go out worldwide and we try to coordinate and aggregate our efforts such that intellectual property around the world is being recognized. WIPO, the World IP Organization, is also a big player in that. And things are changing as nations agree to certain intellectual property rights. I mean, even China is coming into the fore by trying to recognize patents and so forth, and trying to participate in the patent awarding and registering. It's been tough, but we're trying to get cooperation throughout the world.
Very good. I would imagine McGruff is a trademark.
Yes, it is.
Very good. Well, let's move on to the next question. And that is, how is USPTO developing a more efficient data and digital system?
So this relates to when I first came on board, what I saw and what I think needed to happen. How we're doing it is modernizing. That's the easy answer. Okay, we're modernizing. What does that mean? How are you doing it? Because it's a very important thing. Like, we're going to have nirvana. Well, how do you get there, right? So what I saw was a very tried and true approach to project management. They had a PMO and they're running start and stops. They're doing their work. They're getting things done. But in the waterfall fashion, there was a big difference between what was desired and what was delivered. And the only way that I've found to get desired to delivery even closer is to use agility, to use DevOps, to not separate DevOps. In fact, we have an agile DevSecOps philosophy and mentality. With the agility, it's not so much that you do it, right? Here's the process, right? So I check. No, that's not agility. Agility means you can adapt and overcome. You are being agile, not just doing it, right? So being agile means if you have a checklist of 10 things and you only need to do 3, you figure it out. You don't do the other stuff that doesn't matter. It's minor. So really what I did at the USPTO was create a mindset change. But in order to create a cultural change, you have to show people at the line, at the tactical level, a real difference in how they're working. So I eliminated the PMO. Oh my God. But we transferred the projects into products. We took 158 different projects, mapped them to 30 products across 4 product lines. Those lines are easy. Patents is one product line. Trademarks is another. Back office business is the third. And the fourth and final one is IT infrastructure. So we have 4 lines of business. Patents and trademarks can stand by themselves, but they use the common shared services of the back office and business, as well as the shared services of the information technology, right? The IT infrastructure. One of the things I've told my product teams, which are run by business unit owners, they're not run by IT. Those business unit owners own the product. It's their product. They prioritize the work. They have the scrums and the sprints. They have the list. They reprioritize that list based on what they need. They do the trade-offs because they're the closest. Again, you push it to the line. You push it to the edge where the best decisions can be made. Studying World War II, one of the biggest reasons why we won was, well, in fact, even in the Cold War, I'll use that. The difference between American forces and those other than us was we actually let our lieutenants and captains decide on the battlefield how to win the battles. And then we put on our colonels and our generals the obligation and duty to ensure that logistics and supplies were there, such that we ensured that we won the battles, or we learned that when we lost. And we concentrated on what each is good. We pushed it to the edge. We didn't have a centralized command and control. One of the first things I learned, if I wanted to take out the enemy, take out that top man, take out that guy, that colonel sitting in a tank. If I could take him out, everybody else was not, they didn't know where to go because they were always looking for orders. So what you have to do in the agile DevSecOps is you push the accountability as well as the authority to conduct operations. So each of the product teams, they're in charge of doing their own work. And that's the real change. It's not a top-down design. It's not authoritative. It's pushed down to the edge where you're making those decisions. Now, we do the strategy at the top, though. We have these goals. We have these big rocks. And if you put, I don't know if people understand the old big rock analogy into the jar. It's a famous one. You should look it up on YouTube. But the fact of the matter is, if you have a lot of rocks, a lot of pebbles, a lot of sand, right? If you put all the pebbles in first, you're not going to be able to pick the big rocks in, right? You'll break the jar. So you have to prioritize. You have to put the big rocks in, then the pebbles, then the sand, and then you can put in water. And that jar would then be filled up, right? And then you always got to remember to have the beer right next to it, because the fact of the matter is there's always time for a beer to understand and lessons learned. So anyway, I love that jar mentality. You got to look it up on YouTube. It's great.
I've seen it, yeah.
But the priorities is a big deal as far as the team works. And because we push that down and we really do expect them, but we give them the authority as well. They have the authority to do in their lane. We know, make sure they know the guardrails under which they operate. Can they contract with somebody else on their own? Of course not. You still need to go through a procurement. But then what I have to do is ensure those processes are speedy and they're inexpensive, they're efficient. The problem with the government is better, cheaper, and faster. They always want to get better. They never talk about cheaper and faster. And what we need to do is hold the government accountable for the cheaper and faster part too. Because all you do is, I've heard it over and over again. Oh, it's an unfunded requirement and we're going to need all this. No, reprioritize, use what you got. Because if you do everything, that means you're doing nothing. I hope that answered your question. I didn't go off on a diatribe.
No, I think it was an excellent answer. And very eye-opening, I think, for many people. I have started to see more and more agile PMO. So the next question actually starts with this in mind: customers first, business first, and new ways of working. So the question is, how do you frame the approach to automation and emerging technology efforts?
So I'll concentrate on emerging, especially. Emerging technologies, by definition, are not proven. They have potential, but you don't know what it is yet. So because of that, you need to treat it such. You can't expect an emerging technology to actually deliver on the hype. And I'm sure we've all seen the hype cycle curve, right? You start out with, exuberant, it's going to be the greatest thing. And then you realize what it is. And then you get into the trough of despair. And once you come out of the trough of despair, then you're like, oh, this could really be used and you could scale it. So we look at emerging technology on a maturity basis. What we try to do is we try to get pilots to show us the pros and cons in a business case analysis such that we can then scale it in our systems. But I'm not going to be bleeding edge. I don't want a bloody nose. I'll be leading edge and be a fast follower, but I do want it proven before I actually make it part of the system, right? That's what we did with our classification. We had fits and starts with that. And so we waited until it produced real results. Until then, we built on that and scaled on the success. So one of the things too, which is terrible in government, they get an idea and they think it has to work. And I do understand perseverance. That's a great thing to have. But there's a thing called stupidity too, right? Insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I mean, come on. So what we have to figure out is that sunk cost. It's already spent. It doesn't matter. Oh, we got to make it work. No, you don't. What you need to make work is something different. If you're not adapting, if you're not changing materially, the failure becomes bigger and bigger. So fail fast, fail small, and only feed success. Starve the failure stuff, right? And you got to that's not just words, right? You have to show it to the line, because so many people get invested. Oh, I'm going to make this thing work. Thanks a lot. I can see it might have potential. Not now. We'll go after it later, maybe, right? But it just doesn't have that scaling factor. It just doesn't pass the red face test. There's so many things that you have to do as a leader, which our leaders are not doing. Oh, okay, let's try it one more time. Have some courage. Say no. No is said in the business world all the time. No, no, no. And why is that? Because capital is precious. The government needs to look at capital as that precious, and they don't. They assume it's a given. It's like, well, we have that. No, you don't. That darn capital is so precious, and you're wasting it. So that's where another thing comes up, right? Better, cheaper, and faster. I don't understand. Where's the cheaper part? Well, you can't expect that. Yes, I can. I can expect better, cheaper, and faster. And that's what I'm doing.
That's amazing leadership. Very much so, Jamie. It's a great answer. Thank you. Let's see, we'll go on to the next question. Let me see where we are. Okay, so what have been some of the challenges in your data journey?
Well, I think the biggest challenge that we faced is people don't understand strategic high value data assets, what that actually means, because people get so myopic in their view of the world, right? This is my world. I take the input, I do my little thing, and I do the output, and I'm going to protect everything within that little rice paddy. Well, you gotta get out of that mindset. In fact, you should have the mindset that you should be trying to get out of your own job in 3 years. If you can figure out how a machine or somebody else can do your job in 3 years, that probably is the most efficient way to work. Because why the labor, always, labor is the most expensive part of any job. And it should be, because knowledge and mind melding is so important to the task at hand. So when people are just, assuming their little part, they have to look up, and you have to give them a different perspective of why it's important that they need to look up. And the strategic value in the data asset is others can use this to their advantage. Then you have to convince them, well, what's in it for me? Because that's what everybody comes from, right? Sorry, everybody is a selfish little myopic creature. That's the way they are. Everybody, well, what's in it for me? Why would I do that? So you do have another obligation to ensure that you show how it could be better, cheaper, or faster for them. And so it's a coordination of those efforts up and down. That's the biggest challenge, is to understand that everything's negotiable, nothing's off the table, break through and challenge the status quo. And once you do that in your data cataloging, in your data sharing, in any of these efforts that you're having with data, you can get away from, well, I own this data, I can't let you have it. Well, I can let you have it, but why, right? And then you can explain the great part about why you need it, but you have to think about why they should give it too. And if we have that symbiotic relationship where it's a negotiation instead of, I told you to give me my stuff now. Yikes. Okay, that works. And then you've got an enemy, right? It's more about building bridges than it is building enemies. An authoritarian rule always happens. The only time authoritarian rule works is if somebody's going to die or you're going to lose a lot of money. All right. Microseconds or whatever. When seconds count, sometimes you do have to be authoritarian. But once the command is given, duck, hit the ground, don't get killed. All right. After that, you're like, hey, man, I just saw the rounds coming in. That's why I did it. I didn't do it because I got this power trip going on. It seems that so many leaders have this ego thing, do it because I goddamn I'm sorry, because I told you to do it. And it's a terrible way to do business. So you really have to appeal to knowledge workers in a negotiated part. And that's the biggest challenge in government. Well, do it because I said so. No, that doesn't work that way.
No, very exciting answer. I love your passion, Jamie. It's amazing. And yes, that is something that your audience is very interested in terms of, as carriers, we bring tools to the table that automate processes, and it's not so much FTEs that we bring. So yes, very good. So I have actually we're at our last question, and that question is, what lies ahead for PTO?
So there's a lot of things in the data world that lie ahead. We're cataloging all of our information right now. We are curating our 19 petabytes of information for more a digestible source of information. There's currently $1 billion or more industry out there with all the data that we provide, because what these data providers do is they download the public data that's available, and then they put their own analysis on top, and they offer that to the intellectual property community as a value add. It's a value added reseller of government data. And it's a big deal. I think if we could make that information, that data, more accessible to users, just the normal Joe, right? The entrepreneur who wants to look it up, make the search available to him, and then do some deep data analysis with big data, and have some tools out there that they can actually mine for different things and do the conceptual things that the examiners can. And why is that? Because it's very expensive to figure out if you can get a patent or not. And I want to take the entrepreneur who's waited all his life and he's now retired, and he takes his her retirement funds, and she then says, I'm going to make this a patent. And, instead of $250,000 and, 20 months later, maybe it's only $50,000 and maybe a year. That's a lot more reasonable. It's feasible. It's something I think we can do, but we have to change the system and change the workflow. So what lies ahead is to actually make those efficiencies real, to challenge the status of the current workflow, ensuring the quality. A lot of people say, wait a second, if you go faster, you're going to have less quality. No, that's not acceptable. We have to actually improve the quality. So better, cheaper, and faster too. So that's, it's a laudable goal, right? It's like, yeah, it's hard to do. So that's what we're setting out to do.
Well, Jamie, certainly you are the right person at the helm of USPTO and all of this technology moving forward. Definitely, you bring passion and leadership to your role. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. You humbled me. I appreciate that.
So, and with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Pat.
Donna, thank you. And first, I'd like to start and again say, Jamie, I echo Donna's sentiment. You are a very passionate and thoughtful and energetic leader. I always enjoy when you speak on topics that are germane to our industry, but also very near and dear to your heart. So I thank you for that. We have done a tremendous job as an executive board for attempting to bring thoughtful leaders and bring new ideas to ITPA, and you certainly sat at the forefront of this particular topic, but just in general, you really bring a spirit that we appreciate, and thank you again for accepting our invitation to speak to our sponsors and our industry and government leaders and followers. So, and with that, I'd like to again, extend a round of virtual applause and thank you again for participating. And we hope to see you come back and speak again on behalf of the ITPA NCC and your organization. Thank you.
Thank you. It'd be my pleasure.
Awesome. So once again, I'd like to give a special thank you to all of our 2022 season sponsors. We greatly appreciate your continued support of ITPA NCC. So again, to our platinum sponsors, Avaya Government Solutions, Comcast Government Services, Granite Government Solutions, Hughes Government and Defense Solutions, Lumen Technologies, and CommScope. To our gold sponsors, BT Federal, Crown Castle, MetTel, SUS Consulting, T-Mobile Secure Federal Operations, and Verizon. To our silver sponsors, Equinix, GES, Turning Point, Pathway Partners, and Zscaler, and to our technology sponsor, Panoptis Intelligence. And now for a quick preview, we have a few upcoming events that we'd like to highlight, so mark your calendars. First, we'll hold our annual in-person golf tournament in October. Any avid golfers, please join us. And even those who aren't necessarily avid golfers, but like to get out on the links, we would certainly love to have your participation. In March, we will continue to shift into a virtual or remote speaker series until we believe that we have reached a safe point to reinstall in-person luncheon series and host our next webinar monthly. We will have a few speakers tentatively lined up, and we'll talk IT security and make sure that we update you, and please follow us on our social media pages, as well as look for updates on the ITPA NCC website. For the first time, we will also work with the Capital Area Food Bank, which is a vital supply chain for the procurement and distribution of food purchased through multiple fundraisers in our region. And today I'm happy to announce that we have an upcoming opportunity for a volunteer opportunity, 5:30 p.m. At our Washington, D.C. location in DC, obviously, on March 29th. So again, that is March 29th at 5:30 p.m. It's an in-person volunteer opportunity. We will run by the Capital Area Food Bank in accordance with the DC government and CDC recommendations. All volunteers must be vaccinated and are required to wear a mask or face covering at all times in the facility over their mouth and nose. All volunteers, guests, and staff are required to have their temperature taken by touchless scanners when entering the facility. So please contact the Capital Area Food Bank directly at 202-644-9822 if you have any questions or concerns. Please participate. For our next few upcoming monthly events, we'll have a DoD and Small Business Day. And if you missed our 2021 Polaris webinar, visit our website for the replay on demand. We'll look to reconvene this summer on June 2nd for our annual awards banquet. And hopefully it should be a nice enough weather to conduct an open air event similar to our annual golf tournament last year. So without further ado, I'd like to say again, thank you all for your continued support of our local chapter and donating throughout the year. And to all who are joining us for the first time, I hope that you enjoyed today's speaker series and you will join us next month in future events. Thanks all, and have a great remainder of your day.
Thanks all.